The Galactic Combat Academy stood on a world called Thurin Prime. It was old. Very old. For more than 6,000 years, warriors from across the galaxy had come here to learn. They came from planets with 3 suns. They came from moons covered in ice. They came from worlds where the air itself could burn. All of them wanted the same thing. They wanted to become the best fighters in the known universe. The Academy's halls were filled with history. Ancient weapons hung on walls behind protective glass. Armor from dead empires stood in corners like metal ghosts. Every corridor told a story of war and honor and blood spilled on 100 different worlds. Kang, Do-hyun walked these halls alone. He was human. The first human to ever attend this academy. Earth had only made contact with the galactic community 3 years ago, and already they were sending one of their own to the most famous military school in existence. Some called it brave. Most called it foolish. A few called it a joke. Do-hyun did not care what they called it. He was here to learn. He was not tall by human standards, and by galactic standards, he was quite short. His black hair was cut close to his head in the military style. His eyes were dark and quiet, the kind of eyes that watched more than they spoke. He moved through the academy like water moving through rocks, finding the spaces between, never pushing, never forcing. The other students did not know what to make of him. The cavalry thought he was too soft. The Cerathians thought he was too small. The Thren thought he was too slow. None of them had ever seen a human before, and none of them were impressed by what they saw. But Do-hyun kept coming to class. He kept training. He kept watching. On his 47th day at the academy, everything changed. The class was called Advanced Melee Theory. The instructor was Master Velik, a Cerathian warrior who stood nearly 3 meters tall. His body was covered in scales the color of old copper. He had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle, each one ending in a hand that could crush stone. His eyes were yellow and cold, like the eyes of a snake that has learned to think. Velik did not like humans. He had made this clear on the first day when he told Do-hyun that he expected him to fail. He had made it clear on every day since then by ignoring Do-hyun completely. Today, however, Velik was too excited about his lesson to remember his dislike. Today, Velik announced to the class, "We study the precursors." A murmur ran through the students. Even Do-hyun, who had only been in the galaxy for 3 years, knew about the precursors. They were the first, the oldest civilization. They had built ships that crossed galaxies. They had created technology that modern scientists still could not understand. They had ruled the stars for millions of years, and then, 9 million years ago, they had vanished. No one knew why. No one knew how. They were simply gone, leaving behind only their buildings and their machines and their weapons, especially their weapons. The precursors, Velik continued, created the most perfect weapons in galactic history. Their blades have never been matched. Their designs have never been improved upon. For 6,000 years, this academy has studied their work, and for 6,000 years, we have found nothing to criticize. Behind Velik, a display case began to open. The glass slid away with a soft hiss. Inside, resting on black velvet, were 3 weapons. The first was a curved sword, like a crescent moon made of metal. The second was a straight blade, double-edged, about the length of a human arm. The third was short and thick, made for stabbing rather than cutting. All 3 gleamed under the lights as if they had been made yesterday, not 9 million years ago. "These are authentic precursor weapons," Velik said. His voice was soft with something like love. "They were found in a sealed tomb on a world called Axiom 7. They have never been copied. They cannot be copied. Our best smiths have tried for thousands of years. The metal itself seems to resist our efforts." The students leaned forward. Even the ones who usually slept through Velik's lectures were awake now. To see real precursor weapons, to be in the same room with them, was an honor few would ever experience. Velik lifted the curved blade with 2 of his 4 hands. He moved through a fighting form, the blade dancing through the air like a living thing. His other 2 hands stayed behind his back, a sign of respect for the weapon he held. Perfect balance, Velik said. Perfect edge. Perfect weight. The precursors understood combat in ways we are still trying to learn. Do-Hyun raised his hand. Velik stopped. His yellow eyes turned toward the human with obvious annoyance. What is it? May I hold one? The classroom went quiet. Somewhere in the back, someone made a sound of disbelief. A cavalry student named Rilkoth laughed out loud. You? Rilkoth said. You want to touch a precursor blade? Your species was still living in caves when these were made. Do-Hyun did not look at Rilkoth. He kept his eyes on Velik. I would be very careful, he said. Velik stared at him for a long moment. Something moved behind those yellow eyes, some calculation that Do-Hyun could not read. Then, slowly, Velik nodded. Very well, but if you damage it in any way, your species will be paying for it for the next 1,000 years. Do-Hyun walked to the display case. He could feel every eye in the room on his back. He could feel their doubt, their mockery, their certainty that he was about to embarrass himself and his entire planet. He reached for the straight blade, the double-edged one. His fingers wrapped around the grip. It was cool to the touch, smoother than any metal he had ever felt. He lifted it. The blade came up easily, lighter than he had expected. He turned it in his hand, feeling its weight, feeling how it moved. He performed a single cut through the air, a simple motion he had practiced 10,000 times with practice swords. Back on Earth. Then he frowned. He rotated the sword in his grip. He tested the weight again. He made another cut, then another, each one from a different angle. His frown deepened. Master Velik, Do-Hyun said, why is it balanced wrong? The silence that followed was so complete that Do-Hyun could hear his own heartbeat. He could hear the soft hum of the display case. He could hear, somewhere far away, the sound of other classes continuing their lessons, unaware that in this room, a human had just said something impossible. What? Velik said slowly. Did you say? Do-Hyun looked up at the Sarathian. His face was calm. His voice was steady. He was simply asking a question, the way he might ask about the weather or the time. The balance, he said. It is wrong. The weight is too far forward. About 3 centimeters past where it should be for a blade of this length. He turned the sword again. And the grip. It is shaped for a hand that is different from mine. Different from yours too, I think. The fingers would need to be longer. The palm would need to be wider. You are saying, Velik's voice was very quiet now, that the precursors made a mistake? No, sir. Do-Hyun set the sword down gently, treating it with all the respect it deserved. I am saying they made it for themselves. Not for us. He looked up at Velik, at the other students, at all these beings who had spent 6,000 years worshipping weapons they had never truly understood. I am saying that maybe we have been holding them wrong all along. For a moment, no one moved. The classroom was frozen, like a picture, like a moment caught in time. Then everything happened at once. Rilkoth rose from his seat. The cavalry's hard shell had turned dark purple, a sign of deep anger among his kind. His 4 eyes were fixed on Do-Hyun with hatred that was almost physical. How dare you, Rilkoth said. How dare you stand there, you primitive, you insect, and tell us that the precursors were wrong? I did not say they were wrong, Do-Hyun replied calmly. I said the weapons were made for their bodies, not ours. That is the same thing. Rilkoth stepped forward. For 6,000 years, the greatest minds in the galaxy have studied these blades. Scholars, warriors, kings, and you. A human, a member of a species that learned to fly only 200 years ago, You think you know better? Other students were nodding. A Thrin made a clicking sound that meant agreement. Two Mordishi whispered to each other in their liquid language. Master Velik held up one of his 4 hands. The room went quiet. Explain yourself, human, Velik said. His voice was cold, but there was something else in it too. Something that might have been curiosity. Explain this claim. Do-Hyun picked up the curved blade this time. He held it the way Velik had held it, trying to copy the Sarathian's form. The sword felt awkward in his grip, like wearing shoes that were the wrong size. When I hold it like this, Do-Hyun said, the way you demonstrated, the balance feels wrong. The curve of the blade does not match the way the weight moves. If I cut with this angle, I lose power. The energy does not flow through the blade the way it should. He adjusted his grip, changing his stance. But if I hold it like this, if I imagine that my arm is longer, that my shoulder sits differently, then suddenly it makes sense. The curve matches the swing. The weight flows correctly. He set down the curved blade and picked up the short stabbing weapon. This one is the same. The grip is too wide for my hand. But if I imagine a hand with an extra finger, maybe here on the side, then it fits perfectly. Imagination, Rokov spat. You are playing pretend, human. You are guessing. Yes, Do-Hyun agreed. I am guessing. But I am guessing based on what the weapons themselves are telling me. He looked at Velik. Master, how much do we actually know about what the precursors looked like? The question hung in the air. Velik was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. The coldness was still there, but the anger was gone. Almost nothing, he admitted. We have found their buildings, their ships, their weapons and tools, but we have never found their bodies. No bones, no images, no descriptions. It is as if they erased themselves from history on purpose. Then how do we know these weapons are perfect? Do-Hyun asked. How do we know they are the ideal? We have been comparing them to ourselves, to our bodies, to our ways of fighting. But what if the precursors were completely different? What if they had 4 arms like you, Master Velik? Or 6 legs like a Thrin? Or no arms at all? Then how would they hold a sword? Someone asked from the back of the room. Maybe they didn't hold it the way we think of holding, Do-Hyun said. Maybe they had tails that could grip. Maybe they had flexible bodies that could wrap around the handle. The point is that we don't know. We have been assuming that because the precursors were advanced, they must have been like us. But what if they weren't? What if they were as different from us as we are from fish? The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Before, the silence had been angry, disbelieving. Now it was thoughtful, uncertain. A female student near the front raised her hand. She was Sarathian like Velik, but younger, smaller, with scales that shimmered between green and gold. Then, what are you suggesting? She asked. That we throw away 6,000 years of study? That we start over from nothing? No, Do-Hyun said. I am suggesting that we ask questions. That we look at these weapons not as holy objects, but as tools. Tools tell us about the people who made them. The shape of a hammer tells us about the hands that held it. The length of a spear tells us about the arms that threw it. He gestured at the 3 blades. These weapons are full of information about the precursors. We just have not been reading it correctly because we assumed we already knew the answers. Master Velik picked up the straight blade. He held it the way he always had, the way generations of Sarathian warriors had held it. Then, slowly, he adjusted his grip. He changed his stance. He moved the blade through the air in a different pattern. 3 centimeters forward, he muttered. You said the balance point is 3 centimeters too far forward. For me, yes, Do-Hyun said. For a human, it might be different for a Sarathian. Velik made another cut. Then another. His yellow eyes were distant, calculating. 5 centimeters for me, he said finally. The balance point is 5 centimeters past where it should be for a Cerathian body. He looked at the blade in his hand as if seeing it for the first time. I have been teaching this form for 200 years. I learned it from my master, who learned it from her master, who learned it from the warriors who first found these blades. And all of us, for all those generations, we have been compensating, adjusting our movements to match the weapon's flaw. It is not a flaw, Do-hyun said gently. It is just a different design, for different bodies. But we called it perfect, Valak said. His voice was strange now, almost lost. We called it the ideal. We built our entire philosophy of combat around the idea that these weapons represented the peak of what was possible. We taught our students to match themselves to the blade, to change their bodies and their movements to fit a design that was never meant for them. You did the best you could with the information you had, Do-hyun said. That is not failure. That is learning. Rilkoth had not sat down. His shell was still dark purple, but something in his eyes had changed. My grandfather, he said slowly, died in the Third Cerathian War. He carried a sword made in the precursor style. He believed he was carrying a perfect weapon. He believed that if he died, it was his own failure, not the weapon's. Your grandfather was a brave warrior, Do-hyun said, and the weapon he carried was still a good weapon. A great weapon. It just was not perfect. Nothing is perfect. That does not make it less valuable. But we believed it was perfect, Rilkoth said. We built our whole culture around that belief. Then maybe, Do-hyun said, it is time to build something new. The class ended without a formal dismissal. Students drifted away in small groups, talking in low voices, arguing, debating. Some were angry. Some were excited. Some looked like their entire world had been turned upside down. Valak remained behind. He stood alone in the empty classroom, holding the precursor blade, staring at it like a man seeing his reflection for the first time. Do-hyun paused at the door. Master Valak? The Cerathian did not look up. Go, human. I need to think. Do-hyun nodded and left. Behind him, Master Valak, veteran of 100 battles, teacher of thousands of students, lifted the ancient blade and began to learn how to hold it again. 3 days passed. Then a week. Then 2 weeks. Do-hyun continued his classes. He trained with the other students. He ate in the dining hall alone, as always, while the other species sat in their own groups and watched him with new eyes. Before, they had looked at him with contempt. Now they looked at him with something else. Confusion, maybe. Or fear. Or respect. He tried not to think about it too much. On the 15th day after the incident in Master Valak's class, a message arrived for Do-hyun. It was short and formal, written in the official language of the academy. He was summoned to appear at the archive at the 3rd hour after sunset. The archive was a place of legend. Every student knew about it, but few had ever seen it. It was buried deep beneath the academy, in tunnels that had been carved out of the rock thousands of years ago. The academy kept its most precious artifacts there. The objects too dangerous or too valuable or too mysterious for the regular displays. Do-hyun arrived at the entrance exactly on time. 2 guards stood at the door. Cavalry warriors in full battle armor. They scanned him with devices he did not recognize, then stepped aside to let him pass. The elevator took him down for a long time. When the doors opened, he found himself in a corridor made of stone that was older than human civilization. Lights hung from the ceiling, but they seemed dim compared to the darkness that pressed in from all sides. Master Valak was waiting for him. The Cerathian looked different somehow. Smaller, more tired. His copper scales had lost some of their shine. Follow me, Valak said, and began walking without waiting for a response. They moved deeper into the archive. Do-hyun saw displays behind glass walls, weapons and tools and machines from dozens of different eras. He saw armor that would fit no species he had ever met. He saw a sword that seemed to be made of frozen light. He saw a shield that showed a different image every time he blinked. Finally, they reached a large chamber. In the center of the chamber stood a figure. The figure was small, shorter than Do-hyun, shorter than most species he had met. It was wrapped in dark robes that seemed to eat the light around them. When it turned to face him, Do-hyun saw a face like old wood, covered in lines and marks of great age. But the eyes were bright and sharp, like stars in a dark sky. "This is Archivist Tomil," Valak said. "She's been the keeper of this place for 400 years. 400 years. Do-hyun tried to imagine living that long. He could not. Tomil studied him with those bright eyes. She did not speak for a long moment. When she finally did, her voice was soft but clear, like water running over stones. "You are the human who questioned the precursor blades." "Yes, yes." "Archivist, you said they were balanced wrong." "I said they were balanced for different bodies than ours." Tomil made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was hard to tell. "I have been waiting a very long time for someone to say that." She turned and walked toward a wall at the back of the chamber. Valak and Do-hyun followed. When they reached the wall, Tomil placed her hand on a section of stone. The stone glowed briefly, then slid aside to reveal a hidden vault. "For 6,000 years, Tomil said, this academy has taught that the precursors were perfect, that their weapons were ideal, that if we could only understand their secrets, we would become perfect too." "Do you know why we taught this?" Do-hyun shook his head. "Because we needed it to be true," Tomil said. "The first species to reach the stars found precursor ruins everywhere. Technology they could not understand. Buildings they could not copy. It was frightening. These early explorers were alone in a universe that had been shaped by beings far greater than themselves. So they told themselves a story. They told themselves that the precursors were gods, and that if they were faithful enough, if they studied hard enough, they would become gods too." The vault door opened. Inside, on a stand of polished metal, sat a single weapon. It was a blade. But unlike any of the precursor weapons Do-hyun had seen before, the design was different. Simpler in some ways, more complex in others. The curve of the blade was not quite right for a precursor weapon. The grip was wrapped in a material he did not recognize, something that looked almost like leather. "This was found on the same world as the other precursor weapons," Tomil said. "In the same tomb. But it was never put on display. It was never studied. It was hidden here in the deepest part of the archive and forgotten for 4,000 years." "Why?" Do-hyun asked. "Because it did not fit the story." Tomil's voice was sad. "Look at it. Really look at it. What do you see?" Do-hyun stepped closer. He studied the blade, the grip, the way the metal caught the light. He compared it in his mind to the weapons he had held in Valak's class. "It is not precursor," he said slowly. "The design is completely different. The proportions are wrong. The style is—" He searched for the right word. "Foreign. Very good." Tomil nodded. "It is not precursor. It was made by someone else. Someone who lived at the same time as the precursors. Someone we never knew existed." Valak made a sound of surprise. "That is impossible. The precursors were alone. Every scholar agrees." "Every scholar agrees," Tomil said, "because that is what we have always taught. But the evidence says otherwise. We have found objects like this one on dozens of worlds. Weapons, tools, art, all made by hands that were not precursor. We hid them. We ignored them. We pretended they did not exist because they complicated our story." She reached into the vault and lifted the blade. "Hold this," she said to Do Hyun. He took it from her hands. The moment his fingers wrapped around the grip, he felt something change. The balance was perfect. The weight was exactly right. The sword fit his hand like it had been made for him. The balance, he whispered. It is correct. Yes. Tommel's bright eyes watched him closely. This weapon was made by a species that understood something the precursors never did. They understood that tools are not just for the makers. Tools are for everyone who comes after. She took the blade back from him, holding it with a care that spoke of great respect. We do not know what they called themselves. We do not know what they looked like. But we know one thing about them. They believed that the best weapon was not the one that was perfect for one hand. The best weapon was the one that could be held by any hand. Adapted, changed, passed on. Why are you telling me this? Do-hyun asked. Tomil smiled. It was a strange smile, full of secrets and sorrow and something that looked almost like hope. Because you asked the right question, she said. In 6,000 years of students and millions of warriors who held those precursor blades, you were the first to ask why they felt wrong. You looked at holy objects and saw tools. You looked at perfection and saw design choices. She returned the blade to its stand. That is not human arrogance. That is the oldest wisdom in the galaxy. It is the wisdom of the ones who made this blade. And it has been waiting for someone to rediscover it. Do-hyun looked at the weapon in its vault. He looked at Master Velik, whose face was full of confusion and wonder. He looked at Tomil, whose ancient eyes held the weight of 4 centuries of secrets. What happens now? He asked. Tomil turned to leave. Now, she said over her shoulder, we begin to ask all the other questions we have been too afraid to ask. News traveled fast in the academy. By the next morning, everyone knew that the human had been taken to the archive. By the following week, rumors were spreading across the entire planet. By the end of the month, researchers from 6 different species had arrived to see the mysterious blade that did not fit the precursor pattern. Do-hyun found himself at the center of something he did not want. Reporters tried to interview him. Scholars wanted to discuss his theories. Politicians sent messages asking for meetings. He refused them all. He was a student. He had come here to learn, not to become famous. But not everyone was happy with what he had started. The academy had been built on certain beliefs. The precursors were perfect. Their weapons were ideal. 6,000 years of tradition could not be wrong. When Do-hyun questioned these beliefs, he was not just asking about metal and balance. He was questioning the very foundation of how the galaxy understood itself. Some people do not like having their foundations questioned. Do-hyun was training alone in one of the smaller practice halls when Rilketh found him. The cavalry had changed since that day in Master Velik's class. His shell was darker now, always dark, as if the anger had become permanent. His 4 eyes watched Do-hyun with a hatred that had only grown stronger with time. Human, Rilketh said. Do-hyun lowered his practice sword. Rilketh, you have destroyed everything. The cavalry's voice was flat, controlled, but something dangerous moved beneath the surface. Do you understand that? Everything my people believed. Everything we built our culture around. You have torn it apart with your questions. I only pointed out what the weapons themselves were saying, Do-hyun replied. The truth was always there. I just noticed it. The truth. Rilketh made a sound of disgust. You humans love that word. The truth. As if truth is some pure thing, separate from meaning. Separate from history. Separate from the blood that was spilled defending it. He stepped closer. Do-hyun did not step back. My family has served in the military for 12 generations, Rilketh continued. My great-grandfather died believing he was carrying a perfect weapon. My grandfather died believing the same thing. My mother still believes it. When she held her sword and swore to protect our world, she believed she was carrying on a tradition that connected her to the gods themselves. And she was, Do-hyun said quietly. What? She was carrying on a tradition. A real tradition. 12 generations of warriors, all fighting with weapons that were not designed for them, and still winning. Still protecting your world. Still being heroes. Dawn met Rilkoth's 4 eyes without fear. The old story said your family was honored because they carried perfect weapons. The new story says your family was strong enough to master weapons that were working against them. Which story makes your ancestors greater? Rilkoth's shell rippled with color, purple and black, and something that might have been red. You twist everything with your words. I am not twisting anything. I'm just looking at the same facts from a different angle. Then let us look at some other facts. Rilkoth's claws extended, long and sharp and deadly. Fact. You have insulted my family's honor. Fact. You have destroyed beliefs that my people have held sacred for thousands of years. Fact. Under Academy law, I have the right to challenge you to combat. Do-hyun felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his face calm. You want to fight me? I want to prove that your questions mean nothing. That a human who thinks he knows better than 6,000 years of warriors is just a fool with a loud voice. Rilkoth's eyes gleamed. Tomorrow, the main arena. Full rules. Do you accept? Do-hyun knew he should say no. Rilkoth was bigger, stronger, faster. The cavalry had been training since childhood. Their shells could turn away most blades. Their claws could cut through metal. But if he said no, they would call him a coward. They would say that humans were weak. They would say that his questions were just the complaints of someone who could not fight. I accept, Do-hyun said. Rilkoth smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Good. I will enjoy watching you bleed. He turned and left. Do-hyun stood alone in the practice hall, holding his wooden sword, wondering if he had just agreed to die. That night, someone knocked on his door. It was Bae-yuna. She was the only other human at the academy, an observer from Earth's diplomatic corps. She was older than Do-hyun, calmer, more experienced in the ways of galactic politics. She had watched everything that happened without saying a word. Until now. You are going to fight him, she said. It was not a question. Yes, you will lose, probably. Yuna stepped into his room and closed the door behind her. Then why? Why accept a challenge you cannot win? Do-hyun sat down on his bed. He looked at his hands, the hands that had held the precursor blade, and felt its wrong balance. Because if I don't, everything I said becomes worthless. They will say I was just talking, just making noise. They will go back to believing what they always believed, and nothing will change. And if you fight and lose? What then? Then at least I tried. He looked up at her. Humans are new here. We have no history in this galaxy. No legends. No ancient warriors to point to. All we have is what we do right now. If I run from this fight, the story of humanity begins with cowardice. If I fight and lose, at least it begins with courage. Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat down next to him. There is another option, she said. What? Win. Do-hyun laughed. It was a short, bitter laugh. Rilkoth is twice my size. His shell can stop a blade. His claws can cut through armor. How am I supposed to beat him? The same way you beat 6,000 years of wrong thinking, Yuna said. By looking at what everyone else missed. By asking the questions no one else asked. She stood up. Rilkoth is strong. He is fast. He has been trained in the traditional forms his whole life. But those forms were designed for a certain kind of enemy. A certain kind of fight. What are you saying? I am saying that Rilkoth knows how to fight other Kelari. He knows how to fight Cerathians and Thren and Mordashi, but he has never fought a human. He does not know how we move, how we think, what our bodies can do. Una smiled. It was a small smile, but it was fierce. You said the precursor weapons were balanced wrong because they were made for different bodies. Well, Rilkoth's fighting style is balanced wrong too. It is made for different enemies. She walked to the door. Tomorrow, you do not try to beat him at his own game. You change the game. You make him fight a battle he has never trained for. And if it doesn't work, Una opened the door. Then you bleed with dignity, and humanity's story still begins with courage. She left. Do-yoon sat alone in his room, thinking about balance, about bodies, about the assumptions people make without realizing it. Then he got up and began to plan. The arena was full. Students had come from every department of the academy. Teachers stood along the walls. Even Archivist Tamil was there, watching from a high balcony with eyes that missed nothing. The fight between a human and a cavalry was the most exciting thing that had happened in years. Do-hyun stood on one side of the fighting circle. He wore simple training clothes and carried a standard academy blade. He looked small. He looked weak. He looked like a man walking to his death. Rilkoth stood on the other side. His shell gleamed in the arena lights, polished to a shine. His claws were extended, each one as long as a knife and twice as sharp. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight in his life. Master Velik stepped into the center of the circle. This is a formal challenge under academy rules. The fight ends when one combatant yields or is unable to continue. Killing is forbidden. Do both parties understand? I understand, Do-hyun said. I understand, Rilkoth said. His voice dripped with anticipation. Velik stepped back. Begin. Rilkoth attacked immediately. He was fast, faster than Do-hyun had expected. His claws swept through the air in a pattern that had been perfected over centuries of cavalry combat. Any normal opponent would have been cut to pieces. But Do-hyun was not a normal opponent. He did not try to block. He did not try to counter. He simply was not there when the claws arrived. He moved sideways, then back, then sideways again, always staying just outside Rilkoth's reach. The crowd murmured. This was not how fights usually went. Rilkoth pressed forward, attacking again and again. Each strike was perfect, exactly as he had been taught. Each strike missed by centimeters. The human moved like water, like smoke, like something that could not be touched. Stand and fight. Rilkoth roared. Do-hyun said nothing. He kept moving, kept dodging, kept refusing to engage. Una had been right. Rilkoth's training was designed for enemies who fought back. Enemies who stood their ground and traded blows. He had no experience with an opponent who simply refused to be hit. The fight continued. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3. Rilkoth's attacks grew wilder, more desperate. His shell was beginning to darken with effort. His breathing was becoming heavy. That was when Do-hyun began to attack. His first strike was small. A quick cut to the back of Rilkoth's leg, where the shell was thin. It was not a deep wound, but it was a wound. First blood to the human. Rilkoth spun, claws slashing, but Do-hyun was already gone. He had circled around, moving to a new angle. Another quick strike, this one to the joint of Rilkoth's arm. Another small wound. Another proof that the human could touch him whenever he wanted. The crowd was silent now. They were watching something they had never seen before. A human, fighting in a way that broke every rule they knew, and winning. Rilkoth stopped. His 4 eyes were wide with something that might have been fear. What are you doing? This is not how you fight. You are right, Do-hyun said. He was breathing hard too, but his voice was steady. This is not how you fight. This is how I fight." He launched another attack, faster than before. 3 strikes in rapid succession, each one finding a gap in Rilke's defenses, each one leaving a small wound. Then he was gone again, dancing back out of reach. "For 6,000 years, Do-hyun said, still moving, this academy has taught everyone to fight the same way. The way the precursors fought. The ideal way. The perfect way." He dodged another desperate swing from Rilke's claws. But what if the precursors' way was not the only way? What if every species has its own perfect form, based on its own body, its own strengths, its own history? Rilke charged at him, abandoning technique, running on pure rage. Do-hyun sidestepped at the last moment, and as Rilke rushed past, he struck once more. This time, the blade found the back of the Kellere's neck, the only spot where the shell did not protect. Rilke fell. He was not dead. He was not even badly hurt. But he was on the ground, with a human's blade touching his neck, and everyone in the arena knew what that meant. "Yield," Do-hyun said quietly. For a long moment, Rilke did not move. His shell flickered through a dozen colors. His claws dug into the ground. Every muscle in his body wanted to keep fighting, but he was beaten. He knew it. Everyone knew it. "I yield," Rilke whispered. Do-hyun removed his blade and stepped back. He offered his hand to help Rilke up. The Kelveri stared at the hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took it as Do-hyun pulled him to his feet. Rilke looked at him with new eyes. "You did not fight like a human," he said. "You did not fight like any species I know." "What was that?" "I fought like me," Do-hyun said simply. "Not like a copy of someone else. Just me." The crowd erupted. Some were cheering. Some were arguing. Some were already running to tell others what they had seen. But above all the noise, one sound stood out. Archivist Tomil was laughing. Later that day, Do-hyun was summoned to the archive once more. This time, there were others waiting. Bellic, Tomil, scholars from half a dozen worlds. And something new. A hologram floated in the center of the room. It showed a figure that was not precursor, not any species currently known. It was roughly human-shaped but different. The arms were longer. The body was narrower. The face was somehow kind. "We found another vault," Tomil said. "Hidden behind the one where we kept the blade." It contained this recording. The hologram began to speak. The voice was translated by Academy machines, but something of its original warmth came through. "If you are seeing this," the figure said, "then you have done what we could not. You have asked the questions we hoped someone would ask. We were called the Myral. We lived alongside the precursors for 11,000 years. They believed in perfection. They built everything for themselves alone. They could not imagine sharing their creations with others. We believed something different. We believed that the best tools are the ones that can be used by anyone. Changed, improved, passed on. We built weapons with adjustable balance. Grips that could be modified. Designs that could evolve." The figure's face grew sad. In the end, neither we nor the precursors survived. But before we fell, we hid what we could. We scattered our knowledge across the galaxy. We hoped that someday, someone would find it. Someone would pick up a blade and ask why it felt wrong. Someone would look at sacred objects and see them as tools. The hologram looked directly at where Do-hyun was standing. It was an illusion, a recording made millions of years ago, but it felt like the figure was speaking to him personally. The species that inherits the stars will not be the one that achieves perfection. It will be the one that keeps asking questions. It will be the one that improves what it inherits. It will be the one that understands that tools are meant to be changed. The recording ended. The room was silent. Velik spoke first. "We have a name now. The Myral. We know they existed. We have more than a name, Tamil said. We have a philosophy, a way of thinking that humanity seems to share. She looked at Do-hyun. This is not an accident. This is not luck. This is what happens when a species is willing to question everything it is told. Do-hyun looked at the place where the hologram had been. He thought about the blade that fit his hand perfectly. He thought about Rilke on the ground, beaten by techniques that had never been taught in any academy class. What happens now? He asked. Tamil smiled. Now we begin to teach what the Myral knew. That there is no single perfect form. That every species, every individual, has their own ideal way of fighting, of building, of living. That the goal is not to copy the past, but to improve upon it. And the precursor weapons? Do-hyun asked. What do we do with them? We study them, Valak said. But we study them as artifacts of a specific species, not as holy objects. We learn from them without worshipping them. Do-hyun nodded slowly. It was a good answer. 50 years later, the galaxy looked very different. The academy had changed. Students no longer learned a single fighting style. They learned to develop their own styles, based on their own bodies and strengths. The displays still showed precursor weapons, but now they were presented alongside Myral designs and Calvary innovations and Sarathian adaptations. And in one special case, a new type of weapon, the Do-hyun pattern. First human combat blade adopted for galactic military use. Balance adjustable. Grip universal. Design philosophy. Tools are meant to be improved. Kang Do-hyun, now old and gray, visited the academy one last time. He walked through halls that he had once walked alone. Now, human students passed him in groups, talking with Calvary and Sarathians and Thrin like old friends. He stopped at the display that bore his name. He read the inscription one more time. Dedicated to the Myral, who taught us that perfection is not a destination but a direction. And to all those who, when handed sacred objects, have the courage to ask, why is it balanced wrong? A young student, a Calvary with bright orange shell, stopped beside him. You're him, aren't you? The first human? Do-hyun smiled. I asked a question once. That is all. That question changed everything. Questions do that, Do-hyun said. That is what they are for. He looked at the blade behind the glass. He remembered the first time he had held a precursor weapon, felt its strange balance, and wondered why no one else had noticed. The answer, he now understood, was simple. Everyone else had been too busy worshipping the wonder. Humanity had entered the galaxy with fresh eyes. No sacred traditions to blind them. No ancient beliefs to limit them.